go now to New York City. We want to get a report. Maybe it's a postmortem. Maybe it's not quite a postmortem on the Occupy Wall Street movement from our friend and correspondent Eric Draitser in New York City. So, Eric, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Webster. Hello.
Wonderful. Welcome. Glad you could be with us. Give us the lowdown on what's happening with Occupy Wall Street.
Well, so Occupy Wall Street has sort of morphed into a multifaceted entity. So after the protesters were kind of kicked out of Zuccotti Park and the wrangling over access to the park still continues, but basically the majority of the work that's happening now is in these various working groups which report back to the Spokes Council. So
Whoop. I think we're having a technical problem. That was Eric Draitser from New York City telling us about what's been happening since the Zuccotti Park was cleaned out. And of course, we have this pattern now of the police essentially terminating these occupations, and of course that the political climate for that was after 2 months. And no demands. There were no demands that would allow people in the population to see these various Occupy Wall Street groups as fighting for their interests. What were they offering the farmers, women, the poor, and so forth? So I think we have Eric back. Please.
Yes, I'm back. Yes. So the Demands Working Group has been meeting now for about a month and a half or so, and there is a list of demands that's been put together through a variety of means. I guess I want to run through that. Number one on the list of demands is the impeachment of Obama, and this was brought forward by a couple of different people. The impeachment of Obama on a variety of issues, primarily on the attack on Libya, as well as his irresponsibility with regard to the financial crisis and a variety of other issues. The second thing on the list is a Jobs for All program, which to some extent at least would be modeled on a WPA New Deal style program. And there will be a Jobs for All forum, I believe on December 13th, that will be taking place at the New School here in New York City. There's also the demand for the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, specifically with regard to Marcy Kaptur's House Bill 1489, the demand for campaign finance reform, and one or two other specific demands. I brought forward a couple, specifically moratorium on foreclosures, as well as amnesty on all student debts. The issue with the Demands Working Group in general is that it is still very much adhering to the consensus model, and specifically its subservience to the General Assembly. So the idea then is that they will endlessly debate issues, even within the working group, only then to turn around and look to the General Assembly for some kind of a seal of approval or something like that. So this is very much, as far as I'm concerned, a problem. Now, the demands themselves, I think, are good ones. I don't think that they're necessarily the major issues. For instance, things like the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, while, good, is not necessarily, I think, the crux of the issue. Something like the Tobin tax is a far more significant demand. Unfortunately, I'm still having trouble trying to push that one through.
I would say the Glass-Steagall is fine, but for the average person, for Joe Sixpack, this is a rather remote abstraction. The Obama one is going to get you some support in some quarters. It's going to lose you some support in others. I mean, certainly from an sort of abstract point of view, it's fully justified. Whether it's expedient, whether that makes sense in a primarily economic movement, this you have to see tactically. I mean, it seems to me the big issue is you've got to have something that would add up to a recovery program, and that would be something like no cuts, the Wall Street sales tax, and this question of seizing the Federal Reserve and forcing them to cough up the $1 trillion of 0% credit. By the way, we have an example of century bonds, right? Caltech has issued a 100-year bond this week. So if they can do it, why can't Bernanke do it? And then have that go for infrastructure.
Well, yeah, and see, the issue, though, also goes beyond simply just programmatic one. There's also the tactical issue that this is the same issue that I've talked about for weeks on the show, and that is that The way in which even the debate is done, even in the working group, which is a collection of pretty good people, many of them older people, not the 21-year-olds who made up the Zuccotti Park crowd. The problem is, though, that very little actually gets done, and much of it is stifled because of the process and the facilitation and just all of the rules and the methods for how these things are done. And so they could spend 4 weeks discussing an issue and still won't be able to bring it up for a vote to have a proposal on it or anything like that. And so, for instance, something like Glass-Steagall, which I agree with you, but Glass-Steagall was brought up probably a month and a half ago and is still sitting there waiting for some kind of a seal of approval. And so I think that the same issues that we were talking about with Zuccotti Park and with the General Assembly have now filtered their way down into these working groups. And this is, I think, tremendously dangerous and sort of unsettling for the movement in general.
Well, we've been arguing here for weeks and months now that the facilitators are the heart and soul of the counter-revolution, and revolutions need decisive leadership. I mean, you can pick anyone you want from history. It doesn't matter. They've got to be decisive leaders. They're not experts in some Byzantine rule book, Robert's Rules of Order, or the Anarchist Manual of Peter Gelderloos, or the other guy written up in Business Week. And how about the possibility of, if you can't kick the facilitator out, lead a walkout of people who have had it up to here with this endless filibustering?
Well, the problem with that is that even the people who sort of don't buy into the entire notion of the General Assembly have married themselves to this process. I mean, the idea of sitting in the circle for the working group and even speaking when your name is not properly listed in a position order is considered an anathema to what it is that's going on. So in other words, even somebody like me who's got a million things that I want to say, I can't even really get a word in edgewise other than 1 point here, 1 point there. And this is precisely what we talked about back in September with the idea of stifling the movement by forcing the voices that might be able to guide it to be subservient to the overall group. And so this is what's happening. I mean, and I was discussing this, with you already 6 weeks ago. So the notion of kicking out the facilitator, though, this is also quite difficult to achieve because you really will not be able to even get one of these meetings going without a facilitator. And when there is no facilitator in place, multiple people volunteer saying they've gone through the facilitation training, which is, of course, a brainwashing scheme designed to create the millions of facilitators.
I can't resist asking, do they insist on the human microphone even when there's no need, just for the purpose of brainwashing?
No, they don't. But what does happen is that you see...
Eric, hold on. We'll be right back after this break, back on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. We're on the line with Eric Draitser in New York City, reporting on the decline, I guess, of the Occupy Wall Street movement. Eric, you were going through this question about whether they since they insist on the straitjacket, the Procrustean bed of the consensus method with facilitators and the General Assembly and the endless filibuster, do they also have the human microphone just for the sake of the brainwashing effect?
No, they do not have the people's mic or the human mic going in these working groups, but they still do use a lot of the hand signals and a lot of the other marks of what made, sort of Occupy Wall Street a caricature of itself to a large percentage of the population. Right. And so they insist on a lot of these things, and they insist on, continually recording the minutes and then posting them on a forum on Yahoo or something like this, and then pretending that this is somehow the way to get things done. So the idea is, again, that even people who may be philosophically see the silliness of all of this have their voices stifled to the point where really, I think that people who might emerge as leaders in a movement like this are sort of pushed away and turned away, and so it really just becomes the lemmings who continue to go there. There are good people that I've seen who are there, but the more time I spend there and the more people that I speak with, the more discouraged they become, and they gradually fall away like flies.
Well, these are the people to whom we've got to throw a lifeline. What occurs to me is two things. One is it's pretty obvious that New York City would be the most controlled of these environments. In other words, the foundations are there, the left counter gangs are there, the Democratic Party is pervasive. Michael Moore and then the left liberal mushheads are crawling all over this because this is where the media is, right? Michael Moore can go from Occupy to Olbermann and mug and pose and posture, and so can some of these other washed-up left liberal mushheads. The other thing is, well, it might be that in some, other cities, people have, less of the control apparatus. The other thing is we just had a brush with the bottom falling out of the world about Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We had 1, 2, or 3 Euro zombies were about to blow, and we've got reports from Britain that finance oligarchs of the City of London are leaving their offices and they're retreating. They're pulling back to their country houses, which are sort of semi-fortified, and they've got survivalist rations, and they're armed, and they're basically the idea is that the system of production and supply is going to break down when the bottom falls out of the euro, the dollar, and the whole shebang. Maybe there's some perspective that as things get worse, people will wake up to the fact that this lunatic General Assembly system is simply it's an albatross you can't afford to wear around your neck permanently.
Well, and I think that that's possible. Although I think that unfortunately, the more likely scenario out of all of that is that a lot of the people who are active and who wanted to make something happen with this will see a scenario like that play out and see that Occupy Wall Street was a failure, and they'll sort of internalize that failure and they'll simply go away. I think that is a far more likely scenario where they'll take that failure with them and they'll go hide and they will not show their faces in the political arena again.
All right, so we're left with two things. You have a new website. We want you to tell us about that, and maybe there's a chance to organize some kind of a retrospective, a class series in the New York area, probably by now starting in January or something like this, when people wake up from the Christmas holidays. Maybe we can think about something like this. But tell us about your website, your radio program, and what else you're doing, because this is an important presence.
Okay, great. So I have a podcast. First episode is now available on iTunes. It's called Stop Imperialism. The Twitter handle is the same, at Stop Imperialism. So the Stop Imperialism podcast is available on iTunes for free. There is also a website, stopimperialism.com, which, although it is up, is not really in a final form yet. So I would ask that people wait maybe another 3 or 4 days, and I'll have the actual final form of the website up. So it's a combination of video, as well as you can listen to the podcast on there, articles that I will be writing. Now, this is primarily focused on geopolitical issues. A lot of the stuff that you're going to be talking about in the show today, I talked about in the episode that I recorded last Sunday. So Stop Imperialism will deal mainly with geopolitical issues and economics, but I'll also give updates, as they're necessary on what's going on in Occupy Wall Street. Additionally, there will be a political economy, economic theory segment that I'm going to include in the show as well, specifically focusing on the American system of economics, Hamilton and Friedrich List and Clay and Carey, and a lot of that tradition, because, as you've mentioned before, this is one of the ways that we can actually provide real programmatic solutions to the economic crisis, because Austrian school economics is bankrupt, morally and politically bankrupt. Keynesianism is certainly not the way to go in this case, and I think that what people oftentimes don't understand is that there are answers to the complex issues of the day, but first you have to, A, understand the problem, and then, B, you have to have people willing to articulate solutions. So that's another aspect of the show. So again, that's the Stop Imperialism podcast on iTunes and stopimperialism.com, which will be available in the coming days.
Okay, and again, maybe there'll be some appetite when the hangover has ended and the holidays are over. Maybe maybe there's some idea of going back and looking at this theory in some systematic way.
Yeah, and one other thing that I'll also add, too, is that on the website people can see a short film that was made about me and following me around as I went through Occupy Wall Street. The film is called Being a Revolutionary, and it's also available on stopimperialism.com, or you can go on YouTube and just type in Being a Revolutionary, and it's a 5-minute short film that follows me through Zuccotti Park and through some of the polemics and discussions that I had with various Occupy Wall Street people.
That's great, and I take you are the alternative to Gene Sharp and the Albert Einstein Institute. There's the Al Gore vision, right? Current TV has been pushing this how to start a revolution with Gene Sharp and the Albert Einstein Institute and Colonel Robert Helvey of the U.S. Special Forces, coming back dripping with blood from Vietnam and now fighting for democracy in the Arab world. So this is a different idea of revolution, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the one last point, going back to something that you mentioned earlier that I think people want to know, Michael Moore is making appearances actually more regularly than people might think at Occupy Wall Street. He's actually going to be coming specifically to the Demands Working Group that I am a part of, this Sunday, basically to try to impose his version of what the demands and goals should be after having done that with the Goals and Visions working groups and the various other working groups that are part of the Spokes Council. So really, Michael Moore is demonstrating himself to be an agent of particularly the same people that Occupy Wall Street purports to fight. Now, that being said, if you go on Michael Moore's website and you see the list of ideas for demands that he has, a lot of them are good. But, that being said, Obama sometimes gives you something good, but this is merely the window dressing. The sinister element of it is usually hidden, and it's the same with Michael Moore. So Stop Imperialism podcast available on iTunes, Stop Imperialism on Twitter as well.
Okay, and the Jobs Day is when?
December 13th.
December 13th. That's a good day to show up if you want to do something in favor of program. Thanks, Eric. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Webster.
Keep it coming, and congratulations on these new initiatives.